This hour, we shift gears and discuss the issues in the Black community with Brian Mullins, co-founder of the Black Community Collaborative. Here is the first section of that interview.
Brian, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
We want to talk about addressing issues in the Black community. I try to focus on solutions, so I want to first say, what are the problems, how we fix them? And you hear a lot about racial inequalities and lack of opportunities in the Black community, but rarely do you hear people talking about the causes of these problems. And the only way you can address them if you know what the causes are. So I think we start here. Can you tell me what you think the biggest problems in the Black community are?
I think the poverty is the number one key. I think starting with poverty, every other issue from lack of access to capital, housing, education, and then I would say lastly is crime, even though it's important. Crime is what we see after all these other symptoms are in place for decades. So I think first and foremost is poverty. We don't have access to wealth or money, first of all, before wealth, right? Just money to survive on a daily basis and take care of basic needs. So I think what you see in the Black community, you just see the scrambling of a lot of people trying to make ends meet, trying to survive.
You know, you talk about poverty being the problem, and I think the next step, you identify the problems, and the next step is you determine what the causes of that problem is. So what would you say the drivers to the poverty problem are?
I think it starts with just pure capitalism, just the fact that there has to be a bottom caste of society to live in a capitalistic society. There's always going to be rich and poor. So we have that. Is it relegated to the Black community? In a large part, it is. I mean, we know that we are in the bottom caste of America at this point in time, at least a majority of Black Americans, and we've been in this place for decades. And I think there have been systemic policies that ensure and entrench people into the bottom caste. Now you can get out of it, but it is harder and harder. And studies show that it's more difficult when you come from generational poverty to move out of that. It's hard. We even saw during the housing crisis under Obama, when they bail out the banks and save the banks and the financial institutions, but you don't bail out the people. So we saw, housing is the greatest economic indicator for African Americans. I mean, we increase our wealth through housing. You buy a house, you pay on it for 20 years, or your parents own the house, and then they pass it on to you, and maybe you can borrow some money, invest it, or do something down the line. We are losing and don't have that front end home from our parents. I mean, I'm 51 years old. I'm a child of the Great Migration here to Chicago from the South in the 60s. And I would bet the numbers show that people my age did not benefit from our parents' homes because the homes were lost during foreclosure, especially last crisis, or through what we know is predatory lending. They took out all these other loans, reverse mortgages. So we keep falling. Now, on top of that, something just came out here in Cook County, where the treasurer, the Cook County treasurer, comes in and says there are 38,000 houses in fear of being lost over the next 6 months. 75% are Black households. So you're looking at somewhere 22,000 households. Black families are going to lose their housing based on the government itself. These are straight tax levies by our government. So it's all this stuff going on at the same time that makes it difficult when your community is already void of legitimate businesses, void of, now you throw COVID in the mix, and it's just I think we're in a bad place, right? We were already bad prior to COVID. I don't think anybody understands what's going on during this COVID environment. Real quick, Charles, you appreciate this. We watch money all over the country thrown into these PPP loans and these other loan programs. What none of the programs address is, what do we do going forward? Because all the money went to existing businesses prior to COVID, right? Well, guess what? We didn't have businesses in our community before COVID. So all these dollars we talk about does zero to move the needle of Black capital. So these problems continue because nobody, to your point, is going after the base problem. Nobody's going after what is the cause. So,
well, I want to say, you gave me a lot to unpack there.
I know.
I want to start at the beginning. You mentioned capitalism.
Yep.
And you mentioned different caste will, I'll at least say class, but the caste, you can't say caste and then say you can get out of it, because the whole point of a caste is you're stuck in it, you're born in it, and you can't get out.
Okay.
But, it kind of is, well, I don't think you meant it that way, but people will take it as a slight on capitalism. So we have to be clear that every ism has those, right? So you can't, those out there, those, we'll get into political breaks later, but those different organizations that are pushing for for communism or socialism, or you got libertarians, or you have all these different, political or social ideas and ideologies about how we fix the problem. Whatever the economic system is, we're dealing with human nature.
Right.
So you're always going to have people who produce and people who don't produce. So that's going to happen. The question, like you say, is it based on race, or is it a class, and how do you fix it? You mentioned stuff from the past. You mix the past with the present. I argue that the biggest challenge is the fact that when we try to address these problems, we're acting like there's only one cause. So if there's only one cause, you fix that cause and the problem's gone. But racism is part of the problem. Of course it is, but it's not number one, and some people act like it. Too many of us, that's the only thing we focus on.
Right. There
is a class system, there is government intervention, but then there's also the citizen, right? Both what the citizen should do and what the citizen's doing for himself. So if the opportunities, we need more opportunities, and we push our government and we get more opportunities, but then there's going to be some people who do nothing with the opportunities, right? Correct. So then who do you blame for that? You can't, that's part of the problem, I think, is that, and then some people are just selfish and looking at it for personal gain, and they really don't care if it helps. You talk about billions of dollars coming into the community, and just the other day, I don't know if you saw this, but on Twitter, Black Lives Matter DC finally came out, and they were calling out Black Lives Matter, saying, you've gotten $500 million this year. Where the money at? So we can't then go after the fact and get mad at them for not paying attention to what's happening in the Black community. When in a sense, it's kind of a defense to the Black Lives Matter movement. But Black Lives Matter was never about the Black community. They weren't talking about economic development. They weren't talking about skills. They weren't talking about education. They were talking about, police stop shooting us. So we can argue about whether we think that's the problem or not, but if police stop shooting you, you still don't have a job.
Right, but let me draw a little piece out. I don't know. So we watched all this corporate money at the beginning of those Black Lives Matter protests. So I just saw that $5 billion was given to LISC, L-I-S-C, as the National Organization for Economic Development. The problem comes in like here in Chicago, there are a lot of programs, to your point, there are a lot of opportunities and programs that are initiated. So it sounds great. They have press conferences, but you never ever get the funding for projects or initiatives like, someone like myself would apply for, we believe makes sense. So LISC now, so you have a organization that is non-Black being the steward over $5 billion in corporate dollars that were meant for the Black community, right? So those are these fundamental problems that when you have initiatives and we talk about money movement, unless we talk about the whole process, it always fails. So right now, this has not been a very, what I believe is a very good partner to the Black community here in Illinois to begin with. Now they are the stewards of these national corporate dollars, right? I have no more belief that any of those dollars will reach to any outcomes of what we need than those monies given to Black Lives Matter. There's no mechanism to make it a reality. And that's just, to the accountability side of everything, from political movements to government. Money is there. The potential to do stuff correctly is there. It's just never brought together. And I want to say one thing that you mentioned on, I believe we're at the place that we just have to have the opportunity available when somebody wants to take advantage. We know that if you came up with all the opportunities today, a lot of people still won't, and we can't worry about them at this point, in my personal opinion, right? But you have to make the opportunity available to people that are willing to make certain lifestyle changes and do things in their own lives to fix their own communities or move out of these situations. And the ones that don't, I think we're at the point, it's nothing you can really do. I don't think throwing money after money at it makes any sense because it never gets there.
Now, the end of that segment was the biggest part, so big, I'm going to wait to the other side to talk about that. But I do think that there's areas where we agree and disagree, and I say that all the time. I like Brian because he's not a right winger or a left winger. He just truly fix the problem. And that's the thing about the pro-blacks. I talk to my conservative people and say, you need to listen to them because if you might disagree from a race standpoint, their focus being on race, But they don't say that stuff and then go and follow the Democrats. They say, do what's best and see what happens. We talk more with Brian on the other side. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
She's gone.
We return to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer. Once again, here's Charles Love.
Are you tired of summer nights in Maine? Do you yawn when they speak of sunny Spain?
Welcome back.
Could you live
We
without
are
ever seeing
discussing the issues in the Black community with Brian Mullins, co-founder of the Black Community Collaborative. And Brian ended the last segment with a truth that you're not allowed to speak. He simply said, some people will fail. So I start this segment following up on that point.
You were kind of like, some of the people are just not going to do it. That's true. But I'm not saying ignore them, but somebody needs to say that. I give you credit for saying that.
Sure.
Most people, it's basically taboo to say, well, some of these people just aren't going to make it regardless. It's not the system that's making them not make it. It's them that's making them not make it, because that goes to what I talk about all the time, which is the culture. We say we want to help the Black community, and we say the system put us in a negative position. But from where we are now, the laws are clearly in a position where we should be good. The opportunity needs to come more, but we can get a position of opportunity. But we have gotten to a point that we either condone bad behavior, or if you don't want to fix things the way we want you to fix them, then we don't want you here. So how are we ever supposed to make headways, even if we get the opportunities that you're talking about, when the people, at some point, that money, now I talk about this all the time. Let's say Jeff Bezos, he's so rich, he's decided, you know what, I'm tired of people talking about there's no money in the hood. I got plenty of money. Here's $100 million. I have a check. It's in the bank account. Who do I give it to? Who do I give it to, Brian? Do I give it to the mayor? Do I give it to any one of our aldermen? Do I give it to the community activists? Who do I give that $100 million check to?
I think one of the things is to break apart some of these words you're using. Community activists, right? Some people call me an activist. I don't consider myself an activist. So I think it's not an activist. You don't give it to activists. You have to give it to a solid organization. Now you would think, what does that look like? And it's also a box they put us in. I argue with state senators and state reps now about the word capacity. Capacity means, they'll tell you can't get certain dollars because you don't have the capacity. Right. But if you give me this contract, then I can get the capacity. Right. So they keep you on this constant treadmill. We have created a not-for-profit industrial complex based on social services provided to the same poor group of people we're talking about. Right. So we are actually asking the same groups to solve the problems that puts them out of business if they're successful. So I personally don't believe that they're really trying to get solutions of anything. They're just getting a paycheck. So now you create this money, this cash flow. So use public schools out of Chicago public schools into not-for-profits pockets. But the problem of kids learning stays exactly the same. So I think we got to break away from these models, these not-for-profit organizational models that just come into our communities. I mean, Charles, I'm a little bit different. We talk about historical politics and policies. I think Brown versus the board was one of the biggest problems that we have, which created the problem where we're at now, right? It didn't create some type of inclusion in America. It created assimilation instead of integration, right? And so all that started in a certain way. And I still think we're going through those processes of moves like Brown versus the board. You know what I mean? And so every day we sit back and we watch Black kids failing in all these school districts around the country, and we can pinpoint and show every policy and move forward. Matter of fact, we talk about Donald Trump. People run around all happy because Betsy DeVos is going from education, right? I'm saying, hey, she didn't create a race to the top or No Child Left Behind that created all these non-funded mandates and allowed teachers to be fired and all this stuff. Trump didn't do anything like that. When we think that there are people out there working on the behalf of citizens and working on behalf of students, it doesn't appear to be very many groups like that. So to answer your question, other than my group, I don't know who you would give it to, because I think it's going to be problems. I don't care if you talk about the Urban League on down as fiscal agents. They run programs that are not very good programs. So I think that comes to being institutional. and having paychecks and its own mission compared to trying to help change, at the end of the day.
I tell you who you give the money to. I know who you give the money to. Okay. But it's real simple, but it's not simple. You give the money to people, like you said, you give people money to doers.
Right.
You give money to people who are problem solvers, and you give money to people who are really good at that one piece of the puzzle, and tell them, we're only giving you enough to execute that piece, and we're only giving you money to execute that piece, and we'll go to somebody else for the other person. Now, the problem is, that's easy, but the problem is that person doesn't matter. That's why it's a circle. What we need to do is train people up to be that person, pull people from business, pull people from wherever, pull people from the government, have them leave their government job to come out, to step out on a limb to do this, and then fund them to do it. Like you said, don't give it to the organizations that stay. It's just like giving to charity. You want to give charity help. You find a charity that focuses on something you care about, you give them money. But if you feel you're right, you're torn. You give it a really small charity, you feel like they're on the ground, they're close. I want to give it to them, but they're so small, they're struggling. It's only going to help 2 or 3 people. I want to help more people. You give it to the big guy, you look at it like, but they don't need it because they got an endowment of $1 billion. So you're stuck. So we need to create those people that are big enough that they can have an impact, and small enough that they still close to the community. So we have to create that before. So it's just like you and I talk a lot about, we can shift to education since you touched on it, talk about education. And I joke about how it annoys me to no end when I hear people say, what we need in the community is jobs. We need jobs. And I say, no, you don't. You need skills, because we can bring as many corporations to the community as possible, but they're going to drop that building there, pass out 1,000 applications for a myriad of positions, and very few people are going to be able to perform at that level. And the few that can are already working at another company. They're just going to leave that company to come there. So you haven't created jobs. So what we need to do is to create skills, right? So there's things we can do, trades and all that stuff. And you talk about that because that's kind of the area you move in. But even before that, from an education standpoint, at the beginning of education, everybody's saying Black and brown students are being left behind, so we have to fix them, which I agree. But if they're failing in the schools, either because they're dropping out or because they're getting an F, or we're giving them a fake A or a B, but they can't read and we're passing them through, we need to stop that. How do we stop that when we're teaching slavery and we're teaching victimization and we're teaching white guilt in class, which is what's coming down the pike now? Everybody, you talked about earlier about people being excited about losing Betsy DeVos. The reason you need Betsy DeVos there is because whoever replaces her may be better at the technical stuff than her. I don't know, but I can guarantee you that Biden is going to pick someone who's going to be, okay, let's push this BLM agenda in school. They're not getting more time, so what are they going to learn?
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. And that's a problem. We have that here in Illinois. We have curriculum being pushed to the kids now that we don't vote on as a group. We vote on the elected officials who bring up policies, right? As you know. So we can expect Biden to come with his own education policy. We know ultimately that's going to end up hurting our communities in one way or the other, just like every other program has, massive education program. We got to be cognizant, though. Why don't we talk about it? We're still dealing with decades of fail, right? So when you talk about right now, we're probably the 3rd generation of people who have failed out of public school, got passed through without learning anything. So they're getting degrees, and then they have kids, and then their kids are fumbling through education the same way. So again, you got to give people an opportunity or something to interject, or it's going to continue. So I don't have 100% the answer to that, but if we don't interject those type of, families that take place, it's going to continue to fail. But then again, to be fair, we've also seen enormous amount of money and resources pushed into schools and communities of other communities that we never got in the first place. So, we talk about property taxes, which funds education here in Chicago. We watched the Cook County government admit that they tax poor Black communities more for 10 years than commercial and white neighborhoods, right? They were the unfair assessments. And so you watch all these downfalls that come by that. So we just talking about this now because, we got a remap coming up, right? In these districts. It was all about gerrymandering in Illinois forever, right? It was a standard. Nobody cared. Nobody talked about it. Now we've lost about 800,000 Black people out of Chicago in the last 10 years. I guarantee you what we're going to start hearing now. We're going to start hearing fair maps, that we need to draw these things fair and equal and make sure the distribution of population is equal, because the majority of Chicago is now about to be Hispanic, not Black. So just because we're crossing over some of these, demographic thresholds, I'm not still really ready to sit back and just let it go and act like these things were not systemic for decades. I mean, we live in a place where, on one hand, University of Chicago, they will put them up as the saviors, that they come up with, they have done these studies and they got these data portals and they do all this. But at the exact same time, University of Chicago is the biggest gentrifier of Black communities in Chicago. So you got all these institutional forces that makes it hard for community groups and activists to get a foothold. We can't fight the $40 billion endowment in University of Chicago. I mean, we tried, but it's a problem because they're on both sides of the game.
More with Brian Mullins, co-founder of the Black Community Collaborative. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back. We are discussing the issues in the Black community with Brian Mullins, co-founder of the Black Community Collaboratives. And here is our next segment.
Well, now that you mentioned that, I guess it's time to go to the elephant in the room and talk about the political standpoint. Another problem I see, so this show is about issues and solutions. I have a political leaning, as does everybody else. We all have room to have their opinions, but this is not the show that's going to be cheering on Democrats or cheering on Republicans. But sometimes it's going to cross into politics. Sure. And here I want to say that it's interesting you mentioned that, because a lot of the problems you talk about are governmental problems, but Republicans haven't been there for years. So,
correct.
But in our community, we're just like you say, people go around cheering because Trump is gone, like their life is better. But I remember when Obama won his first term, like people were running around the streets. I'm like, yay, I'm not going to pay my rent anymore because Obama's president. All that plays a part. So the question here is politically, how do we get over? In Chicago, you have two hurdles, because you have the one-sided political part where we only vote for one party. So the other party is feckless. I'm not giving them credit. It's their fault. They didn't show up to the game. But because of that, the other side is so strong that we can just do whatever we want. And we just pick the Democrat we want and we move on. So we get nothing from our politicians because they don't have to fight for us. And then you have the second layer of the machine, right? You got the Madigans, the Daily Machine before that. You got the people who are like, well, I'm an incumbent. I'm the power source. So kiss the ring if you want something. So politically, how can we succeed, or can we succeed, if we just keep only looking at the D and saying the D is good, the R is bad? And how do we get past the machine?
Well, we definitely can't just look at the Democratic Party as a solution. They're not solution. They never brought any solution. They are the problem of decades, pretty much every single urban area in the country, definitely in Chicago, right? No ifs, ands, buts about it. But to your point, I also blame the Republican Party. They have not built a political infrastructure. They don't run local candidates, down to a county level. On the state side, they'll run a couple of candidates here and there, but there's no organized effort to build up the party. So it's not my fault that they won't build up. They had a great opportunity. I still think it's an opportunity out here right now, but they got to get on it, right? Or we'll have the same conversations. The biggest thing coming out of that, look in Chicago, we have a Black woman mayor. You have a Black woman county board president, the largest county, second largest county in the country. We have a Black woman CEO of Chicago Public Schools, lieutenant governors, clerk of the courts. We have unlimited positions here in Illinois of all these Black elected officials and positions, state's attorney. But guess what happens? None of it matters. The race doesn't matter because nothing changes on the ground for the community. Now, it's a victory. When you throw in the throws, as we're talking about the reality of stuff, when you throw feminism into it, the fact that they are women, you have Black women at the head of all these things, our mayor's LGBTQ on top of it. Those are layers and layers of protection, but they're really protecting the same group of people that fail our communities at the end of the day. So to your point, having a Black elected doesn't really mean anything anymore, right? It doesn't mean that it's going to take care of our community. We have Black elected officials. They do zero to move the Black community, though. And it's because they are beholden to the Democratic Party, one party, and that's all they're there to serve that party. not to serve the constituents. But again, until we have an independent movement or a Republican movement or another party comes in and makes a difference, I think we're stuck in that environment. And how do you beat the machine? You need somebody like Donald Trump to beat the machine, to be honest with you. That's why I wanted Trump in there, because he was beating the machine down. Here in Illinois, we have a Speaker of the House that's under federal investigation right now for a scandal, Commonwealth Edison scandal, which is our utility. I bet you with Biden coming in, that investigation out of the U.S. Attorney's Office will stop. And that's going to hurt Illinois over time. So all these things, it's a lot.
well, let me add this on this last piece on real quick. And I know you'll be passionate about this.
Good.
In addition to the one party thing, which is just bad for everybody because it's one-sided, you also have the problem with this intersectionality, where we used to be, we need to help the Black community, the Blacks are struggling. And then but now we have a president-elect who's like, oh, how can I help the illegals and the gays? And then I'll work on the Black people later. So tell me what your thoughts on that. I know you are a proponent, as am I, of ADOS. Tell people what that is and why there's a difference between you and, the phony pro-Black, Black Lives Matter things, or the problem within the party.
Right. So I signify, as we call ADOS. ADOS stands for American Descendant of Slavery. It is a subgroup of Black. Everybody's used to being called Black. But in America and around the world, we see that there are Black immigrants that come into America and they are put in different places, from the first at Harvard, or look at Kamala Harris, right? The same. We want to separate these conversations we're having, just like, I use a quick analogy. We all live on Black Street. You have Haitians, you have Jamaicans, and you have ADOS. We just need a house on Black Street. That's what ADOS is, right? It's establishing identity for the group of people. That same group of people are the ones that have been locked into this bottom tier of society for the, past about a decade. So it bothers me when I hear our governor does it, our mayor does it here. Biden is talking about illegal immigrants. We know what that means. There are estimated 200,000 illegal immigrants in Chicago alone. If they become legal citizens, there are now 200,000 more voters that we got to contend with for voting, which is power, right? So I'm against all of that until we can figure out what are we doing for us first.
More with Brian Mullins. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, more of The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back to the show. Talking with Brian Mullins, co-founder of the Black Community Collaborative, about the Black community. And next I ask him about crime.
Do you want to make any comments about crime in the community, how it affects the problems, and what we should do about crime?
Well, crime is, I think it's all rooted in poverty, first and foremost, and failed education. I do believe that we now have a state's attorney that has been reelected in. That goes back to the leftist policies, right? We watched this defund the police effort and conversation. They talk about take the police out of schools. It started with no cash bail, and on the surface, no cash bail sounds great. If you don't have money to bail yourself out, should you be penalized by losing your job and staying incarcerated and all that? But the side effects is there are a lot of individuals being released out into, it's the implementation of it. People are being re-released back out into the community, vagrants, people causing more problems in our community. We watch people committing crimes, and then you watch the news story and it says, oh, well, they were arrested 6 months ago for this felony, and here they go again. And I'm thinking, well, why ain't they locked up in the first place? We've even moved the threshold from theft here in Cook County. It used to be $300 prosecuting for theft. It's now $1,000. So you basically gave a green light to people to steal, right? And I think that keeps our communities riddled with individuals and petty crimes that are, I forgot what the word of it is, but it's just the fines and the fees and the tickets, and just where you don't want to be bothered anymore. So what do? You leave because you don't want to have to walk around people standing on the blocks and things like that. So I think all that is part of the crime problem in Chicago. We have more shootings and murders than we've had, I think, in the last 30, 40 years. And it's during COVID. We have tremendous uptick. We don't see them fighting crime. You don't see police running up and down the streets. I really have no idea. You know, I'm a big one on that government worker side. I'm not sure what teachers and police officers and everybody are doing since everybody's in the house. I know we still paying their salaries, but crime ain't stopping. It's getting worse. So you would think with more people in the house, crime should be easier to solve, but it's not. It's getting worse.
Right. I agree with that. I mean, I wish you could. I feel bad pushing back on you and then not having enough time for you to report. But, the part, I got to get bothered when people tie the poverty to the crime, because it reminds me of Les Mis and Jean Valjean. It's like we grew up poor. I'm a year or so younger, a year and a half younger than you. And I grew up poor, and people in my neighborhood wasn't robbing people. This is why I say a lot of this is the cultural thing, because it does make a bad situation worse, but I don't want to just give people a pass and say, "Oh, you're only stealing because you're not educated." Or because you're poor.
And let me clarify that. So you understand what my stance on that is. It's not the reason, the only reason. Let me say that, because I make this case that the black schools here in Chicago that have the most progress, the selective enrollment schools, when you look at their poverty numbers, they're at 90% poverty. So it's not poverty, because they're succeeding under the poverty guidelines. So it's definitely on the opposite side. It's not just because of poverty, but I do believe that is a catalyst to all the other systemic issues that create criminals.
Right. So basically, the problems are already there, and poverty is like an accelerant. It's like the gasoline you're throwing on top of the fire.
And you got them in the same communities, it's the same neighborhoods. I'm 51 years old. Most of the same neighborhoods. I mean, most of the neighborhoods are the same. The ones that were bad when I was growing up are still bad today. Only thing that's going to change it is gentrification. And we would think gentrification didn't move people on race, but it will, especially in Chicago. That's when the changes will take place. Mm-hmm. And we see
technically, would you say, here's one that side of gentrification is technically a good thing, just depending on how much of it you get. Right. Mm-hmm. If the neighborhood becomes no longer a black community, it's bad. Because like everybody used to use, and you don't hear it too much anymore, but they used to use Harlem as an example of the bad thing of gentrification. But I think Harlem gentrification is good, because you go to Harlem, it's still a black neighborhood. You had just enough white folks to bring people in, get a Whole Foods and a Starbucks, but there's black folks in Harlem. I don't know if you've been there in recent years, but Harlem is still
kind of like we had Inglewood in Chicago. Inglewood is the same boat, Right.
But so it's good, right? Unless you get too much. If your neighbor, you can push all the black people out of the neighborhood, obviously that's bad. It's going to, but now granted, I'll be fair, it is going to create some middle-class black neighborhoods and some lower middle-class black neighborhoods. So the blacks who stay will tend to be, more affluent. But why shouldn't the black affluent people who still stay in Bronzeville and other places in the neighborhood have the safety that the white middle-class people have in Lincoln Park? Why shouldn't we have a black neighborhood like that?
And we should. And that is the biggest conundrum, what you just talked about. That's when I talk about class that way. That is the problem, right? You're replacing a poor black class with a upper black class in the same geographic space, like Bronzeville, like you mentioned. That's exactly what's happening. You have a traditional poor black community that is now going to be an upper middle class black community. It's still black, but it's a different class of people.
And I would argue to your poverty point that that's not the problem in itself. That's not a problem. The problem is we didn't get to that next time is the citizenry. I blame the citizen. We go to the government and say, fix the problem. I think it's middle class and upper middle class's job to fix the problem. So that middle class group from around University of Chicago, Bronzeville and all that, what are you doing to give back to the community? Too many of my middle class friends say, well, that's what the government's for. I'll just pay more taxes. No, make my taxes low and I'll promise to cut some checks.
But that also goes back to how our communities operate, right? We have different types of communities at this point in time. I talk about business. And I don't care if you don't live in a neighborhood or participate in it, the race of the owner of the business doesn't matter. So you can have black owners that don't, interact in the black communities. So it's kind of like we got to get specific in all these combos.
So we've covered most of the problems. We covered education, we covered finance, we covered crime. So the only thing is whether people will take the right approach with these things. Coming up, the final segment with Brian Mullins, co-founder of the Black Community Collaborative. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
The Charles Love Show continues on AM 560, The Answer. Here's Charles Love.
Welcome back. We are discussing the issues in the black community with with Brian Mullins, co-founder of the Black Community Collaborative. And after all the other parts that we talked about that caused the problem, I wanted to finish up by asking him about improving the conditions and what we should do. But first, I want to go to the live line and talk to Verlon. Verlon, welcome to the show.
How's it going, Charles? I just wanted to tell you, great format, great first hour, even better second hour. I just want to know, why are we following that same old Black Panther model, whereas though we want to force government to give money to programs to help our community? We have enough rich Black people, middle-class Black people, and working Black people to create our own fund to help our own people, instead of buying into the scams of charity, gathering up money to help us, and government programs giving us money to help us. And I want to say to the school issue, the failing school issues, that's why we should advocate for vouchers. I believe in parents making the decision to take their kids to the school they want them to be educated at, and we'll save money in doing so. And the last issue, as far as crime, I want to say, Black people, stop being cowards. You have the right now to own a gun. Take your corners back from these drug dealers with legal guns, and the police will back you. You will never see drug dealers standing on the corners of white neighborhoods. And thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Verlon, with the passion. I think that, well, let's listen to what Brian's solutions are, and then I'll respond.
I'm going to still at this point believe that the quickest way is voting in the correct people that are not scared to make structural changes. Other than that, we have to take the little wealth that we have and continue to build upon it. So we have two paths. I just believe government intervention, but only through the agencies and what the government's supposed to do. You're supposed to educate the kids. Just educate them. In Chicago, they spend $8 billion a year. I'm here in New York, probably somewhere comparable, not to educate the kids. It drives me crazy. You know what I mean? So I still think government intervention in the way of what I call equity, meaning the existing tax dollars being used need to be brought into these low-income communities with some decisive push-in mindset to help fix and move the needle for people that want to move it. And you kind of triage everybody else.
Well, an hour goes by fast. Some of those things I didn't even get to.
We could talk forever, right?
Right. You brought up some stuff, and I'm like, we got to get back again. So you just have to come back. But I do want to save some time for you to talk about the work that you're doing, because you do work on solutions. So talk about what you're doing and tell the people how they can find out more about it.
So we have a couple of big initiatives about to kick off. We're setting up a business incubator and business portal in order to access the contracts and the wealth given out by government via contracts that we're supposed to be getting a piece of the pie, but we never get it. So that is to help businesses get certified and move down the line. And then on the organizing side, we got Citizens for Civic Education, which is going to be a precinct-based, issue-based organizing organization. So we will finally, first and foremost, on our own, with no isms behind it, go and talk to every Black voter and Black resident about what do you want, what do you need in your life. We're not intersectional. We're not going to come from a one-sided view. It's to understand first where we at, what we need, but to be that communication tool and that advocacy group to push elected officials towards policies that will help our community.